5 years after a slice of pizza changed the galaxy, Zara stood before the newly constructed memorial wall on New Geneva Station, her bioelectric field glowing with quiet pride. Thousands of names were etched into the crystalline surface, not of the dead but of the connected. Every refugee who had found a new home, every volunteer who had opened their hearts to strangers, every community that had chosen to grow rather than merely survive. The wall had been Tom's idea, naturally. "We need to remember that kindness is contagious," he'd said during the planning committee meeting. "Every name here represents someone who decided to pass it forward." Today marked the 5th anniversary of what historians were already calling the Community Revolution, the moment when the galaxy's approach to displacement and refugee assistance had fundamentally shifted from bureaucratic processing to genuine integration. The ceremony drew representatives from hundreds of worlds, but Zara's attention was focused on a small group near the memorial's center. 3 Thylorian children, born on different worlds but raised together in the Proxima Station community, were playing a game that would have been impossible to imagine 5 years ago. They switched effortlessly between Thylorian harmonic communication and standard speech, their bioelectric fields intertwining with the emotional resonances of their human and Andromedian playmates. They were still recognizably Thylorian, but they were also something new, citizens of a galaxy where difference was celebrated rather than merely tolerated. Dr. Thelvani, a young voice drew her attention. A human teenager, perhaps 16 standard years, approached with the kind of nervous energy that reminded Zara of her own younger self. "I'm Maria Santos. I wanted to thank you for the scholarship program." Zara studied the girl's face, finding something familiar in her earnest expression. "Maria Santos, you're the applicant from the Luna City refugees, aren't you? The one who wants to study xenobiology?" "Yes, ma'am. My family came here 3 years ago when the mining colony collapsed. We'd heard about the network programs, but we didn't expect..." Maria gestured helplessly at the thriving community around them. "We didn't expect to find a home. And now you want to help others find theirs?" Maria nodded enthusiastically. "Dr. Chen has been mentoring me through the application process. He says the University of Centauri has accepted my proposal for cross-species emotional resonance research." Zara felt her field warm with pride. The scholarship program had been another network innovation, identifying promising young refugees and providing them with educational opportunities that might otherwise be impossible. Maria was the 43rd recipient, and like many of the others, she planned to dedicate her career to helping displaced beings find belonging. "Dr. Chen has good judgment," Zara said with a smile. "But the real question is, what's your favorite food?" Maria laughed, clearly understanding the reference. "Actually, it's pizza. Dr. Chen told me about the day he first shared pizza with you. He says it taught him that sometimes the most important conversations start with the simplest questions. Smart man. Though I think he understates his own role in what happened. He says you all do that. Everyone I've interviewed for my research project says the same thing, that the community revolution happened because ordinary beings made ordinary choices to be kind. But the statistical impact suggests something much more significant." Zara raised an eyebrow. "You've been doing research on us?" "It's my senior project," Maria said, her cheeks reddening slightly. "Analyzing the sociological factors that enabled rapid scaling of human compassion models across diverse galactic communities. Dr. Chen said you might be willing to be interviewed." Before Zara could respond, a familiar voice interrupted their conversation. "Are you trying to steal my research partner?" Tom approached with Maya and Skip in tow, all of them wearing the slightly disheveled look of people who had been setting up for a major ceremony. Skip had grown considerably over the past 5 years, his carapace now bearing the intricate decorative markings that indicated his status as a cultural liaison specialist. "Tom," Maria's face lit up with genuine affection. "I was just asking Dr. Thelvani about the interview for my project." "Which I'd be happy to do," Zara said. "But first I want to hear Tom's opinion on your thesis. He's gotten very good at predicting which research directions will actually matter." Tom's cheeks reddened slightly. "I just think Maria's onto something important. The question isn't how humans developed effective compassion models, it's how those models became universally adoptable despite significant species-specific differences in social structure." "The answer," said a new voice, is that you taught us to see refugees as potential family rather than temporary problems. They turned to see Ambassador Harmony of distant stars approaching, their crystalline form chiming softly in the afternoon light. The Andromedian had become one of the galaxy's most respected voices on refugee policy, largely due to their own experiences with the network. Harmony, Skip's mandibles clicked with pleasure. Did you see the final integration statistics from the Kepler 442 evacuations? 93% long-term settlement success, Harmony chimed proudly, compared to 47% under the old processing systems. But more importantly, cultural preservation indices remained above 80% across all species groups. Zara nodded, but her attention was caught by something else. Near the memorial wall, she noticed a small figure sitting alone on a bench, a young Pixian, probably recently arrived, watching the ceremony with the kind of careful observation that spoke of profound loneliness. "Excuse me," she said to the group, already moving toward the bench. Some instincts, it seemed, never faded. The Pixian looked up as she approached, large dark eyes full of uncertainty and barely suppressed hope. Zara recognized the expression immediately. She'd worn it herself 5 years ago. "Hello," she said in Standard, then repeated the greeting in the few words of Pixian she'd learned over the years. "I'm Zara, what's your name?" "Pip," the young being replied in a whisper. "I'm Pip. I just arrived yesterday on the transport from Sector 7. Your first day on New Geneva Station? That can be overwhelming. Are you here with family?" Pip's posture deflated slightly. "No family. The bombardment. I'm the only one who made it to the evacuation ships." Zara felt her bioelectric field pulse with sympathy. Another orphan. Another being torn from everything familiar and thrust into an uncertain future. But this time she knew things would be different. "Pip, have you eaten yet today?" The young Pixians shook their head and Zara smiled. "Well then, I know just the place. There's this human vendor who makes something called pizza. It's basically bread with cheese and vegetables on top. But somehow it tastes like hope." As they walked toward Tony's Pizza Palace together, Zara caught sight of Tom watching from across the plaza. He smiled and gave her a small wave, understanding immediately what was happening. The cycle was continuing as it always did, as it always would. "Pip," Zara said as they approached the vendor booth. "How do you feel about meeting some new friends? I know some people who are very good at helping newcomers feel welcome." Behind the counter, Tony Marcelli looked up with a grin. "Ah, Zara. Good to see you. And who's this young one?" "Tony, I'd like you to meet Pip." "Pip, this is Tony. He makes the best pizza in the galaxy." "Tony, Pip just arrived yesterday and could use some friends." Tony's expression softened immediately. "Well then, Pip, you've come to the right place. The first slice is always free for newcomers, and I've got some people here who are going to want to meet you." As if summoned by some invisible signal, Tom appeared at Zara's side, followed by Maya, Skip, and Dr. Peterson. Within minutes, Pip was surrounded by warm voices and genuine smiles, being introduced to the community that would become their new family. "You know," Tom said quietly to Zara as they watched Pip tentatively try their first bite of pizza, "I used to think that day I approached you was about courage. But I think it was really about recognition. Recognition, recognizing that we're all just beings trying to find our place in the universe. That the only real difference between us and them is whether someone's been willing to make the first move toward connection." Zara watched as Pip's face lit up, with delight at the taste of melted cheese and herbs, as Maya began explaining the community network's programs. As Skip launched into an enthusiastic description of the cultural preservation initiatives, another lonely being was about to discover that they weren't alone after all. "Tom," she said, her bioelectric field glowing with contentment, "do you ever wonder what the galaxy would look like if every species had humanity's gift for making strangers into family?" "I don't have to wonder," Tom replied, gesturing at the scene around them. Dozens of species mingling freely, sharing food and stories and laughter. Children playing games that incorporated traditions from a dozen different worlds. Elders from former enemy species collaborating on art projects that blended their cultural heritage into something entirely new. "Look around, Zara. We're already building it, one conversation at a time. One slice of pizza at a time." As the afternoon sun began to set over New Geneva Station, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them all here. From a lonely Thylorian refugee sitting in a corner booth, to a galactic community built on the simple. 2 years after the pizza that changed everything, Zara found herself standing in the cargo bay of the transport ship Redemption's Hope, watching as the last of the evacuation pods were loaded aboard. Outside the viewports, the dying star of the Kepler 442 system pulsed with unstable energy, its death throes forcing another mass evacuation across 3 inhabited worlds. But this time, things were different. Network Team 7. Status report. Zara spoke into her communicator, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. Vorthon families successfully linked with host communities on Tau Ceti Station, came Maya's voice over the comm. Integration packages distributed, mentor assignments complete. Kethani pod groups assigned to Andromeda Gateway, reported Skip, his standard now flawless after 2 years of practice. Skip has personally verified host family compatibility. Medical assessments complete for all Pixian evacuees. Dr. Peterson's voice crackled through. No signs of serious trauma displacement. The pre-evacuation counseling protocols worked. Zara smiled as she checked off each report on her datapad. The Galactic Refugee Assistance Program had officially adopted the community network model 8 months ago, and this was their first large-scale test. Instead of simply processing displaced beings through bureaucratic channels, teams of volunteers, mostly human-led, but increasingly diverse, were already waiting at destination points with housing, social connections, and most importantly, genuine welcome. "Tom, how are we doing with the transport coordination?" she asked. "Like clockwork," came his reply from the ship's communication center. "Every evacuee has been matched with a destination community before they even board the ships. No more warehousing people in temporary facilities while we figure out where they belong." The difference was extraordinary. Zara remembered her own evacuation. The confusion, the fear, the sense of being nothing more than a problem to be solved. These refugees were still scared, still grieving for their lost worlds, but they weren't lost. They knew exactly where they were going and who would be waiting for them. "Dr. Thelvani," Captain Martinez called from the loading ramp. "We've got a situation down here." Zara made her way through the cargo bay to where a small group of Thylorian families had gathered. Her bioelectric senses immediately picked up their distress. Fear mixed with stubborn determination, and underneath it all, a familiar loneliness that made her chest ache. "What's the problem?" she asked Captain Martinez, though her attention was focused on the family's emotional signatures. "They're refusing evacuation, say they'd rather take their chances with the star than be scattered across the galaxy like last time." Zara's field dimmed with understanding. These were survivors of her own world's evacuation, beings who had already lost everything once and couldn't bear the thought of starting over again. She could see it in their postures, the way they held their children close, the defensive clustering that spoke of trauma and loss. "May I?" she asked the captain, then approached the group slowly, letting her own bioelectric field project calm reassurance. "Honored families," she said in formal Thylorian, "I am Zara Thelvani, daughter of the coastal cities, survivor of Thylos Prime." The group's leader, an elderly Thylorian with scales darkened by age and stress, stepped forward. "You are the one who speaks to the galactic powers about our suffering?" "I am one voice among many," Zara replied carefully. "But yes, I have spoken to the Council about the failures of the old evacuation systems." "Then you know why we cannot leave. To be scattered again, separated from kin and kind, processed like cargo." His bioelectric field flickered with old pain. "Better to die as Thylorians than live as nothing." Zara felt her heart break for them. This was exactly the kind of despair that the network had been designed to prevent. But these families had been lost in the bureaucracy before the new systems were in place. "Honored elder," she said gently, "what if I told you that things have changed? That you won't be scattered, won't be processed like cargo, that there are communities waiting for you, families ready to welcome you as kin?" The elder's field flickered with skepticism. "Pretty words, young one. But the universe cares nothing for Thylorian family bonds." "Perhaps not," Zara agreed. "But humans do." She activated her personal communicator, switching to the wide band frequency that connected all the network teams. "Maya, I need you to patch me through to the Thylorian community on Proxima Station." "Stand by," Maya's voice came back. A moment later, a new voice filled the cargo bay, warm, familiar, singing with the harmonic overtones of home. "Little Star?" The voice belonged to Zara's cousin Keth, whom she hadn't seen since the evacuation. Zara, is that really you? Zara felt tears streaming down her face as her bioelectric field blazed with joy. Keth, you're alive, you're safe, I thought. We all thought. Safe and thriving, little star. We've got a beautiful community here. 43 families and growing. Mixed housing with humans and Andromedians, but our own cultural center, our own gardens. The children are learning both standard and proper Thylorian, and the bioelectric resonance chambers work perfectly. The evacuee family's fields shifted from skepticism to amazement as they listened to Keth describe life on Proxima Station. This wasn't the sterile existence of processed refugees. This was a real community, maintaining their culture while building something new. Elder Veltan. Keth's voice grew formal as he recognized the group leader. We have 17 open family units prepared specifically for Kepler 442 survivors. The Council of Matriarchs voted unanimously to welcome any who wished to join us. Elder Veltan's bioelectric field flickered through a dozen emotions: hope, disbelief, gratitude, and underneath it all, a desperate longing for home. The Council of Matriarchs still meets every 7 days, just as on Thylus Prime. Elder Cythera leads us now, and she specifically asked me to tell you that the Coastal Cities delegation has a seat waiting for you. Zara watched as the Elder's resistance crumbled. This was what the network truly offered, not just survival but continuity, the chance to remain who you were while becoming something more. How is this possible? One of the younger Thylorians asked. How do humans know to preserve what matters to us? Because they asked, Zara replied simply. Instead of assuming they knew what we needed, they asked what would make us feel at home. And then they helped us build it. The loading proceeded smoothly after that, with families boarding the transport ships with excitement rather than resignation. As the last ship prepared to depart, Zara found herself standing on the observation deck with Tom, watching the dying star paint the evacuee fleet in shades of gold and crimson. Penny, for your thoughts? Tom asked, using an Earth idiom she'd grown fond of. I was thinking about that first day in the food court, she replied. How terrified I was when you sat down with that pizza. I thought you might be some kind of predator, or that you were making fun of me somehow. Tom laughed. And I was terrified you'd tell me to go away. I'd been working up the courage for weeks. What made you finally do it? Honestly, I realized that the worst thing that could happen wasn't rejection. It was watching you sit there alone for another day and knowing I could have done something about it. Zara leaned against his shoulder, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. And now look what we've built. Thousands of beings finding new homes, new families, new hope. All because you couldn't stand to see someone eating alone. We built it, Tom corrected gently. All of us. The network isn't a human thing anymore, Zara. It's a community thing. Skip's teaching Kethani integration techniques to Andromedian volunteers. Harmony is developing cultural preservation protocols with Vorthan artists. Dr. Peterson is training refugee medics to become full practitioners. He paused, looking out at the evacuee fleet as it prepared to jump to hyperspace. You know what I think the real breakthrough was? It wasn't convincing other species to adopt human methods. It was showing them that compassion scales. That kindness isn't just a nice-to-have luxury. It's the foundation of civilization. Captain Reeves said something similar. That day she brought her ship in half dead. That you don't leave people behind, ever. That's the thing about humans, Tom said with a grin. We're stupidly optimistic. We see a problem and think, someone should fix this. And then we look around and realize we're someone. Zara watched as the last transport ship vanished into hyperspace, carrying its cargo of families and hope toward new homes. In a few days, she would receive reports from dozens of stations and colonies, integration statistics, cultural preservation metrics, mental health assessments. But the real measure of success wouldn't be in the data. It would be in bioelectric fields blazing with joy as families reunited, in the laughter of children learning new games from alien playmates, in the quiet satisfaction of elders watching their traditions take root in foreign soil. Tom, she said quietly. Yeah? Thank you for asking if I like pizza. He squeezed her hand. Thank you for saying yes. Behind them, the star continued its death throes, but the life it had nurtured was safe, spreading across the galaxy to bloom in new soil. And at the heart of it all was the simple human conviction that no one should face the darkness alone. 6 months after her first slice of pizza, Zara stood before the Galactic Council's emergency assembly, her bioelectric field carefully controlled to project calm confidence. The massive chamber buzzed with translation devices as delegates from hundreds of worlds listened to her testimony about the refugee crisis that had been unfolding across the galaxy. The journey from lonely refugee to council witness had been unexpected, but perhaps inevitable. Her work at the medical clinic had revealed patterns in refugee trauma that the official agencies had missed. Her reports on bioelectric field displacement, co-authored with Dr. Peterson and Tom, had caught the attention of xenopsychologists throughout the core worlds. When the council called for expert testimony on refugee mental health, Zara's name had been at the top of their list. But standing here now, facing the most powerful beings in known space, Zara found herself thinking not about statistics or medical protocols, but about a human who had asked if she liked pizza. "Honorable delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I come before you not just as a researcher, but as someone who has lived the reality we're discussing. 6 months ago, I was another lost refugee on a crowded station, invisible to most beings around me. Today I represent thousands of displaced persons who have found new purpose through an unlikely source: human compassion." The Andromedian delegate chimed a question, which the translation system rendered as, "Dr. Thelvani, your research suggests that human-led refugee integration programs show success rates 30% higher than standard protocols. How do you account for this statistical anomaly?" Zara had been expecting this question. The numbers were undeniable, but explaining them required understanding something that most species found baffling about humans. "Honored harmony of ascending notes," she replied, recognizing the delegate's formal crystal structure. "The difference lies not in resources or efficiency, but in philosophy. Most species approach refugee assistance as a temporary problem requiring practical solutions: housing, food, basic medical care. Humans approach it as an opportunity to build something permanent: community." She gestured to the holographic display showing New Geneva Station's refugee integration statistics. Take the station community network, founded by a group of humans led by Dr. Maya Okafor. Rather than simply processing refugees through official channels, they created what humans call chosen family structures. Every newcomer is paired not just with services, but with social connections. The Cathani representative clicked aggressively. "Inefficient sentimentality. Resources should be allocated based on need assessment, not emotional bonding." "With respect, honored one," Zara replied, her bioelectric field carefully neutral. "The data suggests otherwise. Refugees integrated through human-led programs show lower rates of depression, anxiety, and social displacement. They're more likely to find permanent employment, form lasting relationships, and contribute to their new communities. The initial investment in emotional bonding pays dividends in long-term stability." What she didn't say, what the statistics couldn't capture, was the memory of Tom sliding into her booth with pizza and kindness. How do you quantify the moment when someone chooses to see you as a person, rather than a problem? "Dr. Thelvani," came a new voice from the human delegation, "your research partner Dr. Chen has proposed expanding the community network model to other stations. What challenges do you foresee in scaling human-style integration programs?" Zara smiled, thinking of Tom's latest project proposals. He'd been working tirelessly to document and replicate the informal networks that seemed to spring up naturally wherever humans gathered. "The primary challenge, Ambassador Torres, is that what humans do instinctively doesn't always translate well to formal protocols. The network succeeds because it's built on genuine relationships, not bureaucratic structures. You can't mandate kindness or regulate compassion." She paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of delegates representing species that had spent millennia developing complex diplomatic and social protocols. "But perhaps that's the point. Humans have shown us that the most powerful force for healing trauma isn't technology or efficiency. It's the simple act of choosing to care about someone you've never met. It's asking, 'Hey, you like pizza?' instead of walking past someone who's struggling." The session continued for another hour, with delegates questioning everything from resource allocation to cultural compatibility. But Zara found her thoughts drifting to the real reason she was here: the story behind the statistics that no formal report could capture. After the session ended, Zara made her way through the council complex to a small cafe where Tom was waiting. He'd been attending the proceedings as part of Dr. Peterson's research team. documenting how different species responded to human integration methods. "How'd it go?" he asked as she slumped into the chair across from him, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "I think we made an impression," Zara replied, accepting the cup of coffee he'd ordered for her. "The Andromedians want to implement modified network structures on their refugee worlds. The Vorthans are interested in cultural exchange programs. Even some of the Kithani delegates seemed intrigued, though they'll never admit it publicly." Tom grinned. "See? I told you that your presentation would change minds. You've got hard data to back up what we've all been feeling, that there's something special about the way humans approach these problems." Zara studied his face. This human who had accidentally started a revolution by sharing lunch with a lonely alien. "Tom, can I ask you something I've been wondering about for months?" "Shoot. That first day when you brought me pizza, had you been planning it? Watching me and working up the courage to approach?" Tom's cheeks reddened slightly. "Is it that obvious?" "Yeah, I'd been thinking about it for weeks. You just looked so sad and alone. It bothered me that everyone was just walking past like you weren't there." "But why did it bother you? Most beings would consider that normal social dynamics. Thylorians are supposed to be naturally social. My isolation was my problem to solve." Tom was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "I guess because my grandmother always taught me that loneliness is everyone's problem. She used to say that a community is only as strong as its most isolated member. If someone's sitting alone, hungry and scared, then we've all failed somehow." Zara felt her bioelectric field glow with warmth. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." She was. She came to Earth as a refugee herself, during the Sino-Malaysian conflicts in the 2090s. Spent 3 months in a displacement camp before a local family took her in, taught her the language, helped her find work. She never forgot what it felt like to be dependent on the kindness of strangers. And she taught you to pay it forward. She taught me that kindness isn't charity, it's how you build a civilization worth living in. You take care of the people around you because someday you might be the one who needs taking care of." Zara thought about Captain Reeves, literally poisoning herself to save her passengers. About Maya opening her home to refugees. About Dr. Peterson creating jobs for people who needed purpose. About Skip learning human customs despite mockery from his own kind. "Is that a human thing or a Tom's grandmother thing?" she asked. Tom laughed. "Honestly, I think it's both. Humans are weird that way. We're tribal and territorial and competitive, but we're also constantly trying to expand our definition of tribe. My grandmother's family took her in because they'd been refugees once too. The network takes in newcomers because we remember what it felt like to be newcomers ourselves. Even when you weren't refugees, technically, you were born here. Maybe, but I think every human carries some genetic memory of being strangers in a strange land. We're nomads who spent millennia wandering, looking for places to belong. So when we see someone else who's lost and looking for home, something in us recognizes the feeling." Zara reached across the table and took his hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. 6 months ago, she would never have imagined touching a human, let alone feeling such deep affection for one. "You know what I told the council today? About the difference between treating refugees as problems versus opportunities? Yeah, I learned that from you. From all of you. The network doesn't exist because humans are naturally good at integration protocols. It exists because you see potential family in every stranger you meet." Tom squeezed her hand gently. "And now you're part of that family. Forever." Looking around the cafe, Zara noticed other small groups gathered in conversation. Beings from dozens of species. Some of them clearly refugees or newcomers, others established residents. Many of the tables had that distinctive mix of species that suggested community network connections. Word was spreading, apparently. The model was replicating itself naturally, just as Tom had hoped. "What's next?" she asked. "For the research? The council wants us to develop implementation guidelines for other stations. Maya's been asked to consult on 3 different refugee integration projects in the outer systems. And for us?" Tom's smile could have powered a starship. "Dinner with the family. Skip's been practicing his cooking skills, and Harmony promised to bring those crystalline fruits you like. Maya wants to celebrate your first council testimony with..." 3 weeks later, Zara's life had transformed beyond recognition. The cramped refugee quarters had been replaced by a comfortable room in Maya's apartment, complete with a small desk where she could study and a window that looked out onto the station's central garden. The daily routine of sitting alone in the food court had given way to a schedule packed with research work, language lessons with Skip, and evening meals with her new chosen family. My medical clinic had become her second home. Dr. Peterson had been right about her background being valuable. Her Thylaurian education and bioelectric field manipulation proved essential for treating patients from empathic species. She'd already helped diagnose 3 cases of field displacement syndrome and had assisted in developing a new treatment protocol for interspecies emotional trauma. But it was the small moments that meant the most to Zara, like this morning, when she'd arrived at the clinic to find a thermos of coffee waiting on her desk. Maya had remembered that she'd developed a taste for the human beverage. Or yesterday, when Skip had proudly shown her his latest standard essay, written entirely without translation assistance. The network had given her something she'd never expected to find again, a sense of purpose and belonging. Today felt different, though. There was an energy in the clinic, a buzz of excitement that had everyone moving a little faster, speaking a little more urgently. Zara noticed it immediately when she arrived for her shift, her bioelectric senses picking up elevated emotional states throughout the medical bay. "What's happening?" she asked Dr. Peterson as he rushed past carrying a stack of medical supplies. "Emergency beacon," he said, pausing just long enough to explain. "Long-range transport ship heavily damaged, requesting immediate medical assistance. They'll be docking in Bay 7 in about 2 hours. Zara's scale shifted to an alert yellow. Emergency rescues were routine on a station like New Geneva, but the level of preparation suggested this was something bigger than usual. "How many passengers?" 234, Dr. Peterson replied, already moving again. "Mixed species, mostly civilians. The preliminary reports indicate severe radiation exposure and multiple trauma cases." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Medical teams organized triage areas. Supply runners stocked emergency kits, and the station's various departments coordinated to clear space for the incoming refugees. Zara found herself assigned to the bioelectric assessment team, using her natural abilities to detect emotional trauma that might not show up on standard medical scans. When the transport ship finally limped into the docking bay, Zara got her first look at true human determination in action. The ship was a wreck, hull plates torn away, engine sections dark and cold, life support running on emergency power. That anything living could have survived the journey seemed impossible. Yet as the airlock cycled open, beings began streaming out, injured, frightened, but alive. And at the center of it all, coordinating the evacuation with calm efficiency, was the ship's human captain. Captain Sarah Reeves was not what Zara had expected. Small and wiry, with prematurely gray hair and burn scars on her hands, she looked like someone who'd spent her life fighting impossible odds and winning. As she helped an elderly Pixian down the ramp, her eyes constantly scanned the crowd, making sure no one was left behind. "Medical teams to stations," Dr. Peterson called out, and Zara moved to her assigned position. The first wave of evacuees reached the triage area, and she began her work, letting her bioelectric senses probe gently for signs of psychological damage. Most of what she found was expected: fear, exhaustion, grief for whatever they'd left behind. But as she worked through the crowd, Zara began to notice something strange. Despite their trauma, despite their losses, many of the refugees showed signs of something else: hope, gratitude, even joy. Their emotional signatures were complex, layered with suffering but underlaid with a deep sense of security. "Captain Reeves," Dr. Peterson called out as the woman passed by their station, "we need you to submit to medical examination. Radiation exposure protocols." "After everyone else is cleared," Sarah replied firmly. "I'm fine." "Captain," Zara interjected, her bioelectric senses telling her something the medical scanners might miss. "You're not fine. Your emotional field shows signs of severe stress fatigue. You've been running on adrenaline and willpower for days." Sarah paused, looking at Zara with surprise. "You're Thylaurian. I thought most of your people were evacuated to the inner systems." "I was," Zara said simply, "but I found a new home here. And right now that home is telling you that you need medical attention before you collapse." For a moment the captain's composure cracked, and Zara saw the exhaustion underneath. Sarah had been holding herself together through sheer force of will, keeping her crew and passengers calm while their ship fell apart around them. 5 minutes, Sarah conceded. But if anyone needs immediate attention, they'll get it, Dr. Peterson assured her, guiding the captain to an examination chair. Zara, stay with her. Monitor her stress levels while I run the scans. As Dr. Peterson worked, Zara found herself studying Captain Reeves with fascination. The woman's emotional signature was unlike anything she'd encountered. Layers of responsibility, determination, and an almost fierce protectiveness for everyone under her care. But underneath it all was something else, something that reminded Zara of Tom and Maya and all the other humans she'd come to know. "Captain," Zara said quietly, "can I ask you something? Your ship was dying for days before you reached us. You could have jettisoned the cargo bays, reduced passenger load, improved your chances of survival. Why didn't you?" Sarah looked at her with tired eyes. "Because they trusted me to get them home. Every single being on that ship put their life in my hands. How could I choose who lives and who dies? But you risked everyone to save everyone." "That's what you do," Sarah said simply. "You don't leave people behind. Ever." Dr. Peterson looked up from his scanner, frowning. "Captain, these readings show you've been exposed to radiation levels that should have killed you days ago. How are you still functioning?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Same way I've been functioning for the last week. I don't have a choice. My people need me." Zara's bioelectric field flared with sudden understanding. "You've been using stimulants." "Pushing your body beyond its limits. Had to. Someone needed to stay alert, make the hard decisions. Better me than risk everyone else." The simple statement hit Zara like a physical blow. Here was a human who had literally poisoned herself to keep her passengers safe, who had chosen certain death over the possibility of abandoning anyone. It was the most purely selfless act Zara had ever witnessed. "Dr. Peterson," she said urgently, "we need to get her to intensive care immediately. Her body is starting to shut down." As they rushed Sarah to the treatment bay, Zara caught sight of Tom in the crowd of medical personnel. He was helping coordinate the refugee placement process, making sure each new arrival was matched with appropriate housing and support services. When he saw Zara, he smiled and waved, then returned to his work without missing a beat. It struck her then, watching Tom and Dr. Peterson and Maya, and all the others working tirelessly to help beings they'd never met, that this was what humanity really was. Not the individual heroes like Captain Reeves, though they were remarkable. It was the everyday kindness, the assumption that helping others was simply what you did. The way Tom had offered her pizza, the way Maya had opened her home, the way Dr. Peterson had created jobs for refugees who needed purpose. Humans didn't help because they expected gratitude or reward. They helped because, in their strange, wonderful way, they had decided that everyone deserved to belong somewhere, that no one should be alone. Later that evening, after Captain Reeves had been stabilized and the last of the refugees had been settled into temporary housing, Zara found herself back in the food court. But this time she wasn't alone. Tom sat across from her, sharing a late dinner and talking about the day's events. Maya had joined them, along with Skip and Harmony of Distant Stars and several other members of their ever-growing chosen family. "You know what I realized today?" Zara said, looking around the table at these beings who had changed her life. "Humans aren't just good at making friends. You're good at making family out of strangers. You see someone who's lost and you don't just help them. You make them part of something bigger." Tom smiled, that same warm expression that had first made her feel welcome. "Maybe that's because we know what it's like to be alone in a big, scary universe. So when we find each other, we hold on tight." Skip's mandibles clicked in agreement. "Is very human thing, yes. Make family from strangers. Make home from anywhere." Zara looked around the food court at the dozens of species gathered in small groups, sharing meals and stories and laughter. So many of them had probably started out like her, alone, lost, sitting in corners and hoping someone would notice. But humans had a gift for noticing, for reaching out, for asking simple questions like, "Hey, you like pizza?" "Thank you," she said quietly, her bioelectric field glowing with contentment. "All of you, for showing me that home isn't a place. It's the people who choose to love you." And for the first time since leaving Thylos Prime, Zara truly felt like she was home. The next morning, Zara found herself doing something she hadn't done since arriving on New Geneva Station. She woke up excited. For the first time in 3 months, she had something to look forward to. Someone had noticed her, talked to her, shared food with her. The memory of Tom's kindness glowed in her mind like a warm beacon. She spent extra time in the sonic shower, making sure her scales were properly groomed and gleaming. Thylorian scales naturally shifted color based on mood and health, and Zara was pleased to see that hers had regained some of their natural luster overnight. The dull grayish tinge that had marked her depression was fading, replaced by the rich sapphire blue that indicated contentment. The walk to the food court felt different today. Instead of slouching through the corridors with her eyes downcast, Zara found herself observing the station's inhabitants with new interest. She noticed things she'd missed before. The way a Vorthan merchant patiently helped a confused human tourist. How a group of mixed-species children played together in the recreation area. The casual friendships that seemed to bloom naturally between beings who had nothing in common except their presence on this floating city among the stars. When she reached her usual corner booth, Zara hesitated. Yesterday, Tom had made the first move, approaching her with pizza and kindness. But would he come back? Had their conversation meant as much to him as it had to her? The uncertainty made her bioelectric field flicker with anxiety. She'd been sitting for about 20 minutes when she spotted him. Tom was walking through the crowd with purposeful strides, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, human with dark skin and elaborate braids, wearing the blue uniform of the station's diplomatic corps. Behind them trailed a small group of other beings, 2 more humans, a tall Andromedian with crystalline features, and what looked like a young Chthoni. Zara's field dimmed with disappointment. Of course Tom had friends, a life beyond their single shared meal. She'd been foolish to think that one conversation would change anything. She started to gather her things, preparing to retreat to her quarters. "Zara," Tom's voice carried across the food court, and she looked up to see him waving in her direction. "Hey, wait up." The group was approaching her table, and Zara felt her scales shifting toward a nervous purple. What did they want? Were they coming to tell her that yesterday had been some sort of mistake? A misguided act of charity? "Zara, I'd like you to meet some friends of mine," Tom said as they reached her booth. His smile was genuine, warm, with no trace of the pity or condescension she'd learned to recognize in other beings' expressions. "This is Maya Okafor. She works in the diplomatic section and helps coordinate refugee services." The woman with braids stepped forward, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "It's wonderful to meet you, Zara. Tom's told us a lot about you." Zara cautiously reached out to shake Maya's hand, her bioelectric field probing for any hint of deception or mockery. Instead, she found only genuine warmth and interest. "He had talked about me?" "Of course he did," said one of the other humans, a stocky man with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. "I'm Dr. Peterson, by the way. I run the medical clinic here. Tom mentioned you might be having some trouble with the transition to station life." The Andromedian stepped forward, their crystalline features chiming softly as they moved. "I am Harmony of Distant Stars," they said in their musical language, which the translation device rendered as perfectly accented standard. "I arrived here as a refugee 18 months ago. Perhaps we might share experiences." But it was the young Chthoni who surprised Zara the most. She recognized him as the small being Tom had rescued from the bullies yesterday. His carapace was polished to a bright green sheen, and his mandibles clicked in what she now realized was nervous excitement rather than aggression. "I am called Skittering Through Shadows," he said in heavily accented standard, "but Tom friend says I can choose human name too. I think maybe Skip? Skip's been practicing his standard with me," Tom explained, sliding into the booth beside Zara. Turns out those bullies yesterday were giving him grief for wanting to learn human customs. Some Chthoni think it's beneath them to associate with soft-skins. Maya settled across from them, her expression serious. "Which brings us to why we're here. Tom told us about your situation, Zara, and we think we might be able to help. The refugee assistance program has been, let's call it, understaffed. A lot of people are falling through the cracks. But that's where the station community network comes in," Dr. Peterson added, pulling up a chair. "It's an informal group we started to help newcomers get settled. We provide mentorship, job training, social connections, basically everything the official programs are supposed to do but often don't." Zara's bioelectric field flickered with confusion and a growing sense of hope. You want to help me, but why?" You don't even know me. Harmony of distant stars chimed softly, a sound like wind through crystal. When I first arrived, I knew nothing of this place, nothing of its customs. I spent weeks alone, afraid to speak to anyone. Then a human engineer named Sarah took the time to show me how the hydroponics labs worked. That single act of kindness changed everything. The thing about humans, Skip added, his mandibles clicking with what Zara was learning to recognize as amusement, is that they do this thing called paying it forward. They help because they were helped, or because they wish someone had helped them. Tom nodded. Plus, Zara, you're brilliant. I did a little research on Thylorian educational systems after we talked yesterday. You must have been an exceptional student to be selected for off-world placement even before the evacuation. Zara felt her scales shifting to a deep blue of surprise. How did you know about my placement? Your clothes, Maya said gently. Those are academy prep uniforms, aren't they? Modified for comfort, but still recognizable to someone who knows what to look for. You were going to study xenobiology at the Galactic University. The memories hit Zara like a wave. The acceptance letter, her family's pride, the careful preparations for her journey to the core worlds. All of it swept away when Thylus Prime's star began its death throes. Was going to, Zara said quietly. Before everything changed. Now I don't know what I'm going to do. The university says my place is still held. But I have no way to pay for transport or living expenses. The refugee stipend barely covers basic needs here on the station. Dr. Peterson leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. What if I told you there might be another way? The medical clinic has been looking for someone with your background to help with our xenobiology research. It's volunteer work for now, but it comes with educational credits that transfer to most core world universities. And the community network can help with housing, Maya added. We've got connections with families who offer spare rooms to students and refugees. Much better than the standard refugee quarters. Most importantly, Harmony of Distant Stars chimed, you would not be alone. The network is like a family, chosen rather than born. We take care of each other. Zara looked around the table at these beings who had been strangers 10 minutes ago, and now were offering to change her life. Her bioelectric field blazed with emotions too complex to name. Gratitude, hope, disbelief, and something else. Something that felt like coming home. I don't understand, she said finally. Tom, you barely know me. We had one conversation. Why would you do all this? Tom's expression grew serious, and for a moment, Zara caught a glimpse of something deeper in his brown eyes. Because yesterday when I gave you that pizza, you smiled. Really smiled, for what I'm guessing was the first time in months. And I realized that if such a small gesture could make such a big difference, imagine what we could accomplish if we really tried. He paused, glancing around at his friends before continuing. But mostly because this is what humans do, Zara. We see someone who's struggling and we help. Not because we expect anything in return, but because it's the right thing to do. Because we believe that everyone deserves a chance to belong somewhere. Skip's mandibles clicked rapidly in excitement. His very human thing, yes? They are strange species, but good strange. They make family from strangers. Zara felt tears forming in her eyes. A very un-Thylorian display of emotion, but she didn't care. These beings had just offered her everything she'd lost. Purpose, community, hope for the future. And it had all started with a simple question about pizza. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I would like to join your network. I would like to belong somewhere again. Tom's smile could have powered a small starship. Welcome to the family, Zara. Tom Chen had noticed the blue-scaled girl long before yesterday's incident with the Cathani bullies. How could he not? She sat in the same corner booth every day, always alone, always watching the crowd with those enormous violet eyes that seemed to hold galaxies of sadness. While other beings chatted and laughed and went about their daily business, she remained still as a statue, barely touching the nutrition bars that seemed to be her only source of food. It bothered him more than he cared to admit. Tom had grown up in the multicultural melting pot of Earth's New Singapore, where his grandmother had taught him that kindness was a universal language. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, she'd always said, usually while pressing another plate of dumplings into his hands. The wisdom had stuck with him through his xenobiology studies and his volunteer work with the Galactic Refugee Assistance Program. The girl was clearly Thylorian. He recognized the distinctive blue scales, and the way her bioelectric field occasionally shimmered around her when she was particularly emotional. Most beings couldn't see those fields, but humans had developed technological aids to detect them after first contact with Thylorian delegates. It helped with diplomatic relations, though Tom suspected this girl had no idea he could read her emotional state. And right now, that state was heartbreaking. Loneliness radiated from her in waves so strong that Tom felt them even through the crowd's ambient noise. He'd been working up the courage to approach her for weeks, but every time he started walking in her direction, something held him back. What if she didn't speak standard? What if Thylorians considered unsolicited contact rude? What if he made things worse? But today felt different. Maybe it was the way she'd watched him handle the Cathani situation yesterday. Or maybe it was simply that he couldn't stand seeing another being suffer in silence. Tom had finished his shift at the xenobiology lab early and found himself gravitating toward the food court, scanning the crowd until he spotted her familiar figure in the corner booth. She was there, as always, but today she seemed more alert. Her eyes tracked movements in the crowd with greater focus, and her bioelectric field flickered with what looked like anticipation. Tom wondered if she was looking for someone specific, or maybe just hoping that yesterday's moment of excitement would repeat itself. Decision made, Tom walked over to Tony's Pizza Palace, one of the few Earth food vendors on the station. Tony Marcelli was a second-generation Italian-American who'd brought his family's pizza recipes to the stars, and his small booth had become a gathering place for humans missing the taste of home. The smell of melted cheese and tomato sauce was almost enough to transport Tom back to his college days. "The usual, Tom?" Tony asked, already reaching for the dough. "Actually, make it 2 slices today," Tom said, his eyes drifting toward the corner booth. "And maybe throw in some of those garlic knots." Tony followed his gaze and spotted the Thylorian girl. His weathered face softened with understanding. "Ah, I see. The little blue one who sits alone, yes? She looks so sad, that one. Good for you, Tom. Nana always said the best way to make friends is to share a meal." While Tony worked his magic with the dough, Tom found himself rehearsing what he might say. Thylorians were known for their complex social protocols. What if he accidentally insulted her by offering food? But then he remembered something from his xenobiology textbook. Thylorians were also known for their appreciation of genuine kindness, and food sharing was actually considered one of the highest honors in their culture. The pizza slices were perfect, cheese bubbling and edges crispy, with that distinctive aroma that somehow made every human in the vicinity look up with longing. Tom thanked Tony and took a deep breath, walking across the food court toward the corner booth. As he approached, the girl looked up, and Tom was struck again by the sheer expressiveness of her violet eyes. They widened in surprise, and her bioelectric field flickered with confusion, curiosity, and something that might have been hope. "Hey," Tom said, stopping a respectful distance from her table. "You like pizza?" The question seemed to catch her completely off guard. She blinked several times as if she couldn't quite believe someone was actually talking to her. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and musical, with the distinctive harmonic undertones of the Thylorian language. What is pizza?" she asked in carefully pronounced standard. Tom felt his heart do a little flip. Not only was she talking to him, but she'd admitted to not knowing something, which among Thylorians was considered a sign of trust. "Mind if I sit down?" "I'll show you." She nodded mutely, scooting over to make room in the booth. Tom slid in across from her, setting the 2 plates between them. The garlic knots were still warm, steam rising from their golden surfaces. "This," Tom said, gesturing to the triangular slice, "is pizza. It's one of Earth's gifts to the galaxy. Bread dough topped with tomato sauce, cheese, and whatever else you want to pile on top. This one's pretty basic, just cheese and herbs, but it's perfect for first-timers." The girl stared at the food as if it were some exotic artifact. "It smells interesting, good interesting," she added quickly, as if afraid she'd given offense. "Want to try it?" Tom picked up his own slice and took a bite, making appreciative noises. Fair warning, it's probably nothing like Thylorian food. Humans tend to be pretty adventurous eaters. She reached out tentatively, her scaled fingers delicate as she lifted the slice. The first bite was cautious, experimental. Tom watched as her eyes widened and her bioelectric field suddenly blazed with surprise and delight. "Oh," she breathed, taking another, larger bite. "Oh, this is wonderful. The flavors, they're so complex, and the texture." She paused, seeming to realize she was talking to a complete stranger about food. Her field flickered with embarrassment. "I'm Tom, by the way," he said, offering her a garlic knot. "Tom Chen. I work in the xenobiology lab here on the station." "Zara," she replied, accepting the bread with both hands in what Tom recognized as a traditional Thylorian gesture of gratitude. "Zara Thelvani, I was from Thylos Prime." Her field dimmed at the mention of her homeworld. Tom had heard about Thylos Prime. The planet had been evacuated 6 months ago when its star began showing signs of instability. Entire cities had been relocated, families scattered across the galaxy. It explained why she was here alone, why she looked so lost. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "That must have been incredibly difficult." Zara's field flickered with surprise again. Most beings either ignored her refugee status or treated it like something shameful to be hidden. The fact that Tom acknowledged it directly with compassion rather than pity seemed to catch her off guard. "Yes," she said quietly. "Everything I knew is gone, my family, my friends, my school. They scattered us across different stations and ships. I haven't heard from anyone since the evacuation." Tom felt a surge of anger at the bureaucracy that could separate a teenager from everything she'd ever known. But he kept his voice gentle. "That's awful. But you're here now and you're safe. That's something." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, Zara savoring each bite of pizza with the intensity of someone discovering a new form of art. Tom found himself studying her expressions, fascinated by the way her bioelectric field reflected her emotions in real time. Happiness sparkled like golden fireworks, while thoughtfulness created deep blue spirals that reminded him of nebulae. "Tom," she said suddenly, setting down her half-finished slice. "Why did you do this? Bring me food, talk to me." Most beings pretend I don't exist. The question was so direct, so vulnerably honest that Tom felt his own emotions catch in his throat. How could he explain that he'd been watching her for weeks, that her loneliness had somehow become his own burden to carry? "Because everyone deserves pizza," he said finally. "And because sitting alone sucks, no matter what species you are." Zara's bioelectric field exploded with warmth, so bright and golden that Tom had to blink against its intensity. For the first time since he'd noticed her, she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her entire face. Zara pressed her blue-scaled back against the cold metal wall of the station's food court, watching hundreds of beings flow past like a river of diversity. Humans laughed with their colleagues, Kithani merchants discussed trade routes in their clicking language, and Vorthon diplomats glided by in their elegant robes. Everyone had somewhere to go, someone to talk to, something important to do. Everyone except her. The 17-year-old Thylorian pulled her knees closer to her chest, making herself smaller in the corner booth she'd claimed as her daily refuge. Her large violet eyes tracked the movement of the crowd, searching for any sign of acknowledgement, any hint that someone might notice her existence. But as always, the beings of New Geneva Station flowed around her like water around a stone. 3 months. 3 months since the refugee transport had deposited her here with nothing but the clothes on her back and a data pad containing her identification. 3 months of eating nutrition bars alone, sleeping in the cramped quarters assigned to displaced persons, and wandering the station's corridors like a ghost. The irony wasn't lost on her. Thylorians were supposed to be the galaxy's most social species. Her people lived in vast communal cities where solitude was almost impossible to find. They shared emotions through bioelectric fields, creating networks of connection that spanned entire continents. But here, surrounded by thousands of beings, Zara had never felt more alone. A group of young humans passed by her table, their voices bright with laughter. One of them, a girl with short red hair, glanced in Zara's direction. For a moment their eyes met and Zara felt a flutter of hope. But the human girl looked away quickly, rejoining her friends as they disappeared into the crowd. Zara's bioelectric field flickered with disappointment, sending out unconscious waves of loneliness that most species couldn't detect. Humans were among the few who seemed completely immune to Thylorian emotional broadcasts, which made them even more mysterious to her. On her homeworld, she'd heard stories about humans, how they'd somehow managed to become one of the most influential species in the galaxy, despite having no natural telepathic or empathic abilities. They relied entirely on spoken language and physical gestures, which seemed impossibly primitive to most Thylorians. Yet here they were, everywhere she looked, building bridges between species that had been enemies for centuries. mediating trade disputes and somehow making everyone feel welcome. Everyone except her. The smell of something delicious drifted through the air, causing Zara's stomach to growl audibly. She'd been rationing her meal credits, unsure when or if she'd receive more. The Refugee Assistance Program provided basics, but luxuries like fresh food from the vendors were beyond her reach. She'd watched other beings enjoy steaming bowls of Andorian stew and platters of Terran delicacies, her mouth watering at the sight. A commotion near the main entrance caught her attention. A group of Kethani teenagers had surrounded a smaller figure, another refugee from the looks of his tattered clothing. They chittered menacingly in their native language, their mandibles clicking in what Zara recognized as aggressive posturing. The small refugee, a young Pixian barely reaching their waists, cowered against the wall. Zara's bioelectric field flared with indignation. She'd seen this kind of bullying before, both on her homeworld and here on the station. The strong preying on the weak, the established residents making life harder for those who had already lost everything. Her hands clenched into fists, but she remained frozen in her seat. What could she do? She was just as powerless as the Pixian, just as alone. Then she saw him. A human male, probably around her age, broke away from a group near the pizza vendor. He was tall by human standards, with dark hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Unlike most humans she'd observed, he moved with quiet confidence rather than the boisterous energy typical of his species. He approached the group of Kethani bullies without hesitation. "Hey," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the food court. "Is there a problem here?" The largest Kethani turned toward him, mandibles spread wide in an intimidating display. "This is not human concern, Softskin. Move along." The human didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a genuine, warm expression that seemed to confuse the Kethani. "Actually, it kind of is my concern. See, I work with station security during my off hours, and harassment of refugees is specifically mentioned in the station charter as a violation that can result in deportation." Zara leaned forward, fascinated. She'd never seen anyone stand up to the Kethani bullies before. Most beings either ignored them or actively avoided areas where they congregated. "You lie," the lead Kethani hissed, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. The human reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like an official identification badge. "Tom Chen, Junior Security Liaison. Now I can either report this incident and have you all facing a disciplinary hearing, or you can walk away and we'll pretend this never happened. Your choice." The Kethani exchanged rapid clicks in their language. After a moment, the leader stepped back, his aggressive posture deflating. "This is not finished, Softskin." "I certainly hope it is," Tom replied calmly. "Have a nice day." The group of Kethani slithered away, shooting venomous looks over their shoulders. Tom knelt down beside the frightened Pixian, speaking in gentle tones that Zara couldn't quite hear. After a few minutes, the small refugee nodded and scurried away, disappearing into the crowd. Tom stood up, brushing off his knees, and his eyes swept across the food court. For just a moment, his gaze lingered on Zara's corner booth. She quickly looked down at her hands, her bioelectric field flickering with embarrassment at being caught staring. When she looked up again, he was gone, lost in the crowd like everyone else. But something had changed in that brief encounter. For the first time since arriving on New Geneva Station, Zara had seen something that gave her hope. She'd witnessed a human doing what they seemed to do best, standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, building bridges where others saw only divisions. Maybe, just maybe, not everyone on this station was content to let her remain invisible forever. As the crowd began to thin out for the evening shift change, Zara remained in her corner booth, replaying the scene in her mind. The human's courage, his calm confidence in the face of aggression, the way he'd protected someone weaker without expecting anything in return. It was everything she'd heard about humans but had never seen firsthand. Tomorrow, she decided she would sit in the same spot and watch for him again. Maybe tomorrow she would find the courage to do more than just watch.